Racing to the 2021 Kentucky Derby, and this time we move to the Fairgrounds deep in the swamp as we're going to have a 13-horse field for the Risen Star. Now, a couple of horses may scratch out of this race. It looks like Keep Me in Mind is going to run on Monday in the Southwest Stakes at Oaklawn Park. And also, we have Defeater, who's entered in a non-winners of 2 allowance at the Fairgrounds on Saturday, and he only has 1 lifetime start, so he most likely will be scratched from the Risen Star. Let's take a look at some of the top contenders. This is a 50-point race for the Kentucky Derby, so pretty much almost a win and you're in. We get a rematch of the top 3 from the Lecomte Stakes. We get the top 3 finishers in Proxy, Mandaloun, and Midnight Bourbon, and the fractions were slow in the Lecomte Stakes that day. The fractions for the 6 furlong call were about 6 points slower than par, according to Brisnet pace ratings. And this means that the advantage that day probably went to Midnight Bourbon, who was able to control the pace on the front end. Proxy was in between horses and battled on with Mandaloun for 2nd and 3rd. Now, Mandaloun came from a little bit further back that day. I think he probably has a little bit more upside. Plus, he was coming off a little bit of a layoff. Proxy, who got the sandwich that time, he kept on getting hit with the left-handed and kept on drifting out a little bit. So I think that impeded Mandaloun a little bit and may have hurt Proxy's chances. We'll see how those 3 battle it out. Then we've got Starrinmydreams, who drew the 1 post position this time. Dallas Stewart trains. He's going to try to take advantage of that inside post position. He's improved dramatically in his 2nd lifetime start. I think he's going to be a little bit of a presser and probably coming from just a little bit from that pace pressing trip. Now, the other horse who may go to the lead if he does run in this race on the stretch out is Defeater. But again, I think that does point to him being scratched in this race. Then you've got a horse like Beep Beep, who ran on the same day as the Lecomte Stakes, but he ran on the undercard. He never really quite got going that day, but his maiden victory was a little bit of a eye turner, so it'll be interesting to see what Beep Beep can do 3rd time out. Now, Carrillo gets a new trainer after being trained by Chad Brown as a 2-year-old. He is now going to try to stretch out here to 1 mile and 1/8 in the Risen Star Stake. 2 other horses to keep an eye on is O Bezos, a nice win in his last time out. He goes 1 mile and 1/8 here on the stretch out, going to try to take advantage of coming from off the pace. And then the Pride of Remington Park, Senior Buscador, goes off Lasix, but his last 2 stretch running efforts at Remington Park have been circle the field type trips. And if he gets a good trip in this spot, he may come from behind, especially if the fractions are a little bit on the faster side. Sermon on the Mount, where it merits consideration, but his pace figures are a little bit low. And then also, you've got Mandaloun, who to me is one of the top 3 contenders in this race. I like him more than Midnight Bourbon and Proxy. I also like Starrinmydreams. And then I think a horse like O Bezos, whose speed figures put him right in the hunt. Now, the last time out was his 3rd race, so that probably means that he might have consolidated some of the speed ratings from his first 2 races. But that 88, if he could get that to the lower 90s, I think that's what could get you to be competitive here in the Risen Star. So things to watch in this race. I think you've got Senior Buscador, who's going to take some money. Starrinmydreams will probably be about 6 or 7 to 1. The betting may indicate, again, Mandaloun being favored over Proxy and Midnight Bourbon. I wouldn't want too low of a price on Mandaloun. And then you've got the new horses, O Bezos and Starrinmydreams, on the wagering side of this thing. Of course, the winner could come back for the Louisiana Derby, or they could, interesting to see if a horse decides to try to train up to the Kentucky Derby once they pick up those 50 points. I'm going to go with Mandaloun. I'm going to come right back with him. I also like O Bezos. Those are my top 2 picks in this race. I'm not sold on Proxy and Senior Buscador. You know, if the price is right, 8 to 1, 9 to 1, I think he could be worth a shot in using in your multi-race wagers. Who do you like in the Risen Star? Don't forget, Mondays we have the Future Book. Watch all the recap from last week's races. And then we'll also have a preview coming up later on this week of the Southwest Stakes, which is run next Monday at Oaklawn Park. Hit subscribe, ring that bell as we lead you up to the 2021 Kentucky Derby.